Hello, and welcome to another episode from Season 6 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season we're changing things up. We're devoting a whole season to reviewing Esquire's list of the 50 scariest movies of all time. In each episode, we'll break down a different movie, talk about how scary it really was, and then update our rankings to prove how much smarter we are than the other people on the internet. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the conversation. Scream, Red Eye, A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Hills Have Eyes, and The Last House on the Left. What do these movies have in common?
Masks. Wait, I can get this. Wes Craven.
Indeed. All of those movies were directed by Wes Craven. And in doing a little bit of reading about him, because I had heard, this was his first movie. Mm-hmm. The Last House on the Left is the one we're talking about this week. He was a really big player in horror over the years. And I think it's really interesting that he was sort of behind two of the bigger franchises with both Scream and Nightmare on Elm Street. And I kind of feel like he was to the 90s kind of like what James Wan was for the 2010s.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. I mean, anytime you see Wes Craven on a movie, because of us growing up with Scream and Hills Have Eyes and all those, it definitely makes you think it's gonna be a good one. Like my favorite, People Under Stairs, that was a Wes Craven movie. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so he's one who was very active in the genre, and I feel like he was kind of a leader in the genre as well, in that he created some of the big franchises and a lot of the movies that sort of crossed the line from just horror into pop culture. And that was definitely not the case with his early stuff, because they were more genre specific horror movies, and so that's what this one would fall into. But it's always kind of interesting to me to see a notable director's first movie, because I feel like you get glimpses into sort of their style and what they want to do and what they find scary. Yeah.
But it's also not always super well executed, because it's usually on a pretty small budget, like this one.
Yeah, this you definitely see there's there's an idea there, but I assume first movie in the 70s probably, with a low budget. Yeah, I mean, it made sense basically.
Okay, well, cool. I'm gonna introduce it and then we'll get down to business.
Sound good.
In 1972, Hallmark Releasing unveiled The Last House on the Left, a horror film written and directed by Wes Craven. This movie was Craven's directorial debut and tells the story of two teenage girls who are going to a rock concert in a rough neighborhood and end up being abducted by two recently escaped criminals and their associates. The crew tortures the girls and then must face off against the parents of one of the victims due to a bunch of coincidences that don't really make sense. This movie was made on a budget of $87,000 and brought in over $3 million at the box office. It can currently be rented for streaming from Apple.
So, this fact that I have might be one of the best facts in the top 10 best facts ever.
Okay.
Not just us. Yeah. No. So, Wes Craven took his film to the MPAA, and they obviously slapped it with an X rating. Understandably so. Craven obviously wanted a R rating for the movie so it could have a wider release. He went back and removed 10 minutes of footage. However, they still got an X rating. Once again, Craven removed footage, this time taking out 20 minutes. It wasn't enough. Still got the X rating. Finally, Craven put all the original footage back in and got an authentic rated R seal of approval from the film board from a friend of his, put it on the film and released it.
So he just bypassed the system entirely.
yeah, which is super awesome. I mean, I think it's cool. Might as well.
Well, yeah, and this
try your
definitely.
hardest.
I definitely would not expect this to be an R-rated movie in 1972.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
even now,
Yeah.
it would kind of be pushing the line.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was banned by UK, which bans, every movie.
Yeah.
Unless they put out one, but banned by UK until like the 2000s or something, I'm sure.
Oh.
So in this movie, the main bad guy's name is Krug. Krug.
Mm-hmm.
Might sound familiar.
Because of Spencer Krug from Wolf Parade?
And that. But Freddy Krueger. So it's kind of, even though Krueger spelled Krueg, he used it because I don't know. I guess he liked the name Krug.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So the blood for this was a mixture of red and blue food coloring with caramel syrup, which actually looked pretty real. I gotta hand it to him. And
wouldn't taste too bad.
I mean, I'd be down, especially if blood really tastes like caramel.
Only one way to find out.
Just kidding. So okay. So the last fact I have on this movie. There's a ton of facts about this movie too, for the record. But the last fact I have about this movie is it's based on a film, and I'm gonna spell it out, but it's a 1960 film, and it's spelled JUNGFRUKA with the 2 dots above it, LLAN. So Jungfraujolein.
Nailed it.
It's the German in me. I know how to say that word.
Yep.
But anyways, based on that movie. So
nice.
Might one we check out one day.
Yep.
Said sarcastically.
Got him.
Anyway, yeah. So those are some facts about the movie.
Yeah.
The best fact was just the rated R fact. I just
he just lied.
Stop there.
Yeah. But yeah, so this one we were back to our opening with the events you're about to witness are true. The names and locations have been changed to protect those still living. It definitely wasn't. It was, as you said, based on a Swedish film from 1960. So, yeah. Unlike some of the other ones that we've watched, this one didn't really have any basis in reality. And I would like to start by saying I hated this movie. So it's only going to go downhill from here. But I think I'm just really not into some things about Wes Craven's take on horror in general. Like, he tends to mix in dark or ironic humor, but his sense of humor just doesn't really resonate with me for whatever reason. And because, I didn't like Scream either, and that's like a noted classic. But to me, this one just didn't feel really engaging at any point, and I felt like a lot of the things that were happening undermined what the movie was trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was one scene that I actually laughed at, which was when the cops were trying to get to the house to...
with the chicken truck?
Yeah. Well, no. They were trying to get to the house, and they were hitchhiking, and the car pulls over, and they think they're going to get picked up by them, and then they flip them off and drive off.
Oh, yeah.
I laughed at that scene. But, yeah, I think it's... I think... I appreciate the idea of, he decided, because I think he was a teacher before he got into movies or something like that. I might still be thinking of Jack from The Shining, but I definitely appreciate the whole do-it-yourself idea.
Sure.
And putting out the ideas that you want. It's just, for me, and with this movie, it just didn't land too well either. I mean, I think it's kind of rough because it's like when you, and I assume it's because of this 70s and stuff, but I'm pretty sure I know at least one of these actors was a porn star. They actually came out to say, it was the guy with the gray hair. He came out to say that was his biggest regret film wise, and he was a porn star. And so but so the acting has to be a little rough, which you can kind of understand. But when you get, it's like, okay, I understand the acting, but when the story gets a little rough as far as how they get from point A to point B and how they're here, and it's like, okay, that's, how much of it is just kind of sloppy writing in a way. Mm-hmm. But it also could just be from inexperience. And,
sure.
I also, in watching, we watched a ton of horror movies. We started this in 2017, right?
I don't know.
God dang.
We've been
anyways,
at it for a while.
a long time. And so, we watched a lot of horror movies, and I'm starting to wonder, like, how much of these movies are just crazy fantasies of, like, the writer and director who are putting them out, like.
Yeah, Sarah said, as we were watching this, that she thinks the guy is a pervert. And I was like, well, it's Wes Craven. I mean, he's dark. He's always kind of pushing the edge. She's like, no, the guy that made The List.
Yeah.
He's like, a lot of these movies are awful. And I was like, yeah, that's true. So.
There's a lot of torture in it, in this list. And this is obviously one of them. And it's higher up on the list. So I wonder if this person was tortured or something.
This was higher than The Shining. That blows my mind.
And 28 Days Later.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess the overall story is you have two girls who are going to a concert. On the way, they stop and try to buy weed from a guy who leads them into an apartment with two escaped convicts and their girlfriend or something. They proceed to torture the girls and then put them in the trunk of the car and are driving, I guess, to Canada to try and get away from the police that are looking for them. The car breaks down conveniently in front of one of the girls' parents' house. They torture and kill the girls. They go back to their car and look for a place to stay, which ends up being the home of one of the girls they killed. Once there, the parents realize that they had killed the daughter, so they attack and kill them. That's sort of the basic storyline, but you also have to work in a bunch of random party prep montages and bumbling police officer Marx Brothers style sketches.
Yeah. So I've actually watched the 2009 version.
Yes, I did some reading about that
first. And I gotta say it's like 10 times better than this one. It's not like it's one of the greatest of all time. It's just compared to, I feel like they were able to make a little bit more sense out of this. Where a couple things I want to point out about this movie. The soundtrack was just insane. Like there were some songs on there that I was like, this actually is a bad, like, acoustic, like, guitar, which is my cup of tea, and it's like, this isn't too bad. And then, but it's like, they're playing, like you're kind of saying, the Marx Brothers soundtrack while the cops are trying to get, but like in the meanwhile, you're sitting there thinking, like, there's girls having to piss on themselves, in the woods. It's just it's insane. It definitely confusing, I guess I should say.
So I felt like this movie kind of had three elements going at all times. One was the more traditional, like, scary storyline about the girls getting abducted. Then there were also the in-between comedy sketches, and then there was the soundtrack. And to me, all three of those things were pulling the movie in a different direction than the other two. So it never felt like a true horror movie for me. And it was just kind of disorienting for the most part.
Yeah.
Like, what the movie was telling you to, or how the movie was trying to make you react, was just muddled and confused.
Yeah. I think for me, like, what we also have happen a lot of times when we do this podcast, and you and I will have talked about this kind of, we go into the, like, I've gone into doing a podcast with you where I hated the movie.
Yeah.
And then it was explained to me, and, like, just the different take on it. It's like, at the end of it, it's like, actually, you know what? That's a good idea. Maybe we just need someone to explain this one to us, because it's just like, goodness.
This one and Under the Skin. And
yeah, all of them, basically.
Yeah. So I do have a section in my notes where I tried to be positive. So we'll see if we can get through it. But I've heard that this movie is very influential. Like, a lot of horror movie makers have cited it. And I can kind of see that if you look at very specific parts of this movie. So I think, like, The Strangers and Devil's Rejects and even Eden Lake, you could all see kind of some seeds in this that would grow into that, even though the execution wasn't great. And so just the idea of, like, the group of deranged criminals torturing two people and kind of toying with them, and the running away through the woods, even though, you're being attacked for no real reason and you don't really know where you are and you're just trying to get away. So I guess Wolf Creek would kind of fit into that as well. But I can kind of see, because I don't recall having seen stuff like that in movies older than this one.
Right. Yeah.
But at this point, it's kind of a trope of horror movies, so maybe it was influential in that regard.
Yeah, I think yet again, I just I think that I like the idea of things that he had done, but
Yeah.
or I like the idea of doing things on your own and like getting the movie made but even looking at it, trying to look at it from like an artistic standpoint,
Yeah.
it's like I don't see how this is almost the start of the torture porn.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely influenced some stuff that
series.
isn't good. Yeah.
I mean, we're obviously not the biggest fan of,
Yeah.
understandably so. But here's kind of a cool fact:
Okay.
David Hess, who plays the main bad guy,
Mm-hmm.
he was a songwriter in the 1950s, and he wrote songs for Elvis and Pat Boone.
Oh,
I think so much so, or the song "All Shook Up."
I had no idea. I believe he also was involved with a lot of the music for this movie.
Yeah, I think he got hired on as actor and did the soundtrack. I think his brother wrote like a song in the 70s, like a really well-known song in the 70s that I will think of and post.
As soon as you're not trying to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I think as far as this movie goes, I have it didn't make a lot of sense that the audio editing was really rough.
Yeah.
So like you would hear a lot of background noise with the acting, like like at the very beginning of the film, like even when Mary's at the house, like telling where they're going, and just like the openness of like the sexual conversation they were having with the parents was real weird.
It was awkward.
Yeah.
Well, also, like, the male guy is talking to himself, and he's like, oh, Mary got a bunch of birthday cards. You'd think she was the only 17-year-old in the world. They immediately cut to a shower scene, like, full nude of her. And you're like, you just told me that girl was underage. This is not okay.
Right. But, yeah. Yeah, and then I appreciate the scene where it was the newscast over, I think it was the radio, where it was talking about the bad guys who escaped, and it kind of explained them a little bit.
Yeah.
I think what it did well in 2009, opposed to this, it wasn't bumbling police officers. It wasn't like the bad guys were still like super terrible people, but they didn't land right in front of the house. It's kind of the same area and stuff. And the dad, you see that he's more of like kind of a nerd, not like a tough macho man. Rocky Balboa, like going. So like you see why he struggles with them when he's fighting them, because he can be weaker and stuff. This one, it couldn't really explain that one too well. It's almost like it was assumed.
Yeah, he's the biggest guy in the room.
Yeah, I mean, because the toughest person in this whole movie was the mom.
Oh God, yeah.
She took it to him.
She wrecked shop.
Cut throat.
Yeah.
Bit body parts off.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, goodness gracious. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, so there was one scene that I thought was good, like a good horror scene. And that's where they're in the woods and they let Phyllis go after she's been stabbed. And she's like crawling away and they're kicking her, but then they kind of let her go off. And then they catch up to her again. And they're messing with her and she spits blood in the guy's face. And then they all take turns stabbing her. But just the way it kind of changed right there, and the way that they did the camera angles and like the music sound effect stuff, that was a really good and really vicious and really like wrenching horror scene. And I thought that was one of the few places in the movie where everything worked together towards the same thing. So it was like the cameras and the sound and everything made that scene be exactly what it was supposed to be, and you weren't confused about it. But then it kind of just went back to normal after that.
Tried.
And then there was one that was almost good. I started to get excited because I thought the movie was taking a turn. And that's where the switchblade guy has a dream. But he's in the house and he wakes up and the parents have him tied down. And they're about to use that hammer and chisel on his front teeth. And I was so excited because I thought the movie had just turned from, you have these criminals who are out, wreaking havoc, to now the things have totally reversed, and now you have these like sort of normal, mild-mannered, middle-class parents who are so destroyed by the loss of their daughter that they have become the villains.
Yeah.
And they are now the ones inflicting the horror and stuff. But then he woke up and it was just a dream and none of that was really happening and that wasn't the direction the movie was going. So I feel like that kind of is a good summary of how I felt about this movie in general, is every time you thought something good was happening, it wasn't.
Yeah. I generally can kind of tell like how good a movie is by how many notes I take of it, and I have like half a page going here for this guy.
Yeah.
It's also difficult too, because we just did The Shining.
Yeah, right.
You know, and but I will say this though, Maniac came out around the same time as this movie. The Shining was like 10 years later, but Maniac came out around this time, and that was better.
Yeah.
Than
I agree. Yeah, definitely.
Same feel of the movie.
Yeah.
Low budget. But yeah.
Yeah. I agree with kind of what you said earlier too about a lot of this movie. I was just like, wait, what? I was more confused than scared. Because they spent all that time just showing the cops like bumbling around and being idiots and not contributing at all to the overall story. But then even little things, I mean, like they shot Mary while she was in the lake, and they had to shoot her like a bunch for some reason. And then later her parents go out to look for her, and they find her immediately on the shore in the dark.
Yeah.
Anyway. And then, like obviously the car breaking down right in front of the parents' house and all that. There were a bunch of little things that just didn't at all make any sense. And when I find myself paying attention to those things and not to the story or the horror, I know we're in a bad spot.
How terrible would it be to be one of the killers and you just murdered two people, and then you end up at the person you murder's house, like her family's house? That'd be crazy.
Yeah, I think that they were like smug about it,
Right. Oh yeah, I can see that.
But then it was really funny to me because the parents figure it out, and the dad's response was basically Home Alone. And
I was gonna say that. I was like, do you think this inspired Home Alone?
But then the mom's response was to bite a guy's dick off.
Yeah.
So like, dad's like, yeah, I'm pretty hardcore, and mom's like, no, bro.
I got this. Bit that off and then cut a throat.
Yeah.
Goodness. And then the movie ends with happy music.
Yeah.
Like a happy sounding song.
I really expected that cop to come in and be like, them Duke boys are at it again. Or, like some kind of like cliche one-liner to...
Yeah. Cooter, get back in the car. We got to go on to the next crime scene.
Yeah.
Well, in my opinion, swing and a miss, bud.
Yeah. Yeah, this was rough. I cannot come up with any justification for why this would be on this list, much less in the top 10.
Going on off of that too, I mean, if you can watch like real murder shows on ID that have the same kind of concept here, except for you don't see the naked people or the actual murder happening.
And those shows have better acting.
And that's not on this list, so yeah, and better acting. So yeah, still a questionable call from the questionable list, but at least we got this one out of the way.
Yeah, and we're getting so close, dude.
We got two more.
Almost done with this list.
Yeah, I think we got two more left.
Yeah, we got Martyrs and Wicker Man, the original one,
1972 version or whatever. Yeah.
Have you seen either of them?
Nope,
I haven't either.
Not. Martyrs is one that we've talked about for a while.
Yes.
It's just because it's always on lists that we've seen, so I'm interested in that. Normally, I think if it was at the beginning of this, when we started this list, I'd say, well, if it's at 2, then it must be good. However, but I've seen the remake of Wicker Man, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we have better luck with this one.
Yeah. One thing I thought was kind of interesting is if you look at the top 10 on this list, you've got Texas Chainsaw at number 1, the original Halloween at number 3, Rosemary's Baby at number 5, Wicker Man at 6, Last House on the Left at 8, The Shining at 9. And so I feel like the 70s, which I realize one of those was one of those was late 60s, but yeah, but in general, like that, it's interesting to me that so many very classic movies are at the top of the list.
Yeah.
And because to me, you know, sometimes those movies don't translate super well to today.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think if you were looking at this as almost more of a most influential horror movies, that might kind of make sense a little bit more so than scariest, because going back and revisiting these for the first time, or maybe it was just the maker of the list was young enough, you know, alive in the 70s and remembers these coming out and being terrified by them or something. But
could be.
I just thought it was really strange that some of the more modern movies that we would consider to be really scary aren't even close to the top 10.
Yeah. In fact, the writer says about this movie, Craven was one of the few masters of horror who plumbed the depths of America's Vietnam War-era cultures, divided in a grimy, arty thriller about two teenage girls who encounter escaped prisoners in the big city, and how the tables get violently turned. Torture and abuse in this film make Deliverance look like an after-school special. I'm telling you, it's the whole torture thing, man.
Yeah.
This guy was tortured.
Yeah.
We need to send someone in check on him.
Or he's a torturer.
Ooh, been talking a lot of shit about this guy.
I know. I think he's a great writer with a bright future ahead of him.
Greatest list I've ever read in my entire life.
Love it so much. Great work.
Out of my
fella.
lists of best lists, number 1.
Yeah.
I'm so scared.
And if that's not true, my name's not Donnie Hampton.
And I'm Russell. This has been a great podcast.
Oh, man.
Yeah, because you know, if this guy tried to attack Donnie, he snapped him in half.
Oh, obviously. Yeah.
And then explain to him how he could have snapped him in half better.
Yeah. Also, Russell would outrun him.
Well, that's true.
That guy can go forever.
Unfortunately.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I wonder who's gonna. I would think that Wes Craven's probably. No, I'm gonna stop. Just gonna stop.
Okay. The movie was made on a budget of $8,700. That can't be right.
No.
I think it's 87,000. But let me.
Yeah, it's 87.
Typoed hard. Yep. Okay. Damn it. Sorry.
No, that's okay.